Thank you. Good afternoon, CalHR representatives. My name is Esther Burkett. I'm a senior environmental scientist specialist within the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I work in the wildlife branch in the non-game wildlife program. I'm here to provide an overview of the complex and sensitive type of work my colleagues and I conduct. I will also discuss the frustrating situation of the large salary disparity since the like pay for like work pay letter. A few points about my background and current position. I have 37 years of state service with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, currently a specialist, as I mentioned. I have a headquarters position in the non-game wildlife program within the wildlife branch in West Sacramento. Our positions are statewide coordinator positions. For me, I conduct research, permitting, and conservation of threatened and endangered and other special status birds and mammal species, including carnivores and seabirds. I have a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Management from Humboldt State University and a minor in Environmental Planning and Outdoor Recreation. And this is our organization chart for the non-game wildlife program. We have statewide oversight, as I mentioned, for conservation and management of wildlife. There are 8 specialist positions, 2 environmental scientists, and 3 scientific aides under 1 EPM. The non-game wildlife program has not had anyone in a middle supervisory classification for over 29 years. I think this is because the specialists selected for the jobs have the necessary technical expertise, aptitude for the work, and ability to operate independently in a professional and scientific manner. As I will discuss a bit later, the specialists also interact with Fish and Game Commission staff and directorate staff when performing their duties and developing important initiatives and focus areas of conservation efforts. And for your information, that top left photo is raptor biologist Carrie Battistone in the middle, and she's serving on a scientific panel for a special session at a Wildlife Society meeting discussing management conflicts between spotted owls and barred owls. And the bottom photo is of Julie Lancer, one of our scientific aides. She's holding an endangered marbled murrelet that is recovering from anesthesia after the murrelet was marked with a tracking device. And this is the game program organization chart. In contrast, they have a predominance of environmental scientists compared to the non-game wildlife program specialists. So the game program ESs also work at a statewide level. 2 senior ES supervisors oversee the environmental scientists, many of whom are doing work equivalent to that done by the specialists in the non-game wildlife program. In the wildlife branch, some scientists have expressed frustration over not being invited to certain meetings with their regular stakeholders that are held by the senior ES supervisors or EPMs. And the scientists find out about such meetings after the fact. Thus, since the like pay for like work pay letter for supervisors and EPMs, the line between the type of work that an ES and ES specialist as compared to a senior ES supervisor or EPM has blurred. Because we all work together in one branch, the differences and the parallels are known amongst staff, and this creates frustration and affects morale. I've included the picture with the helicopter there in the upper right to show the work we conduct can be dangerous at times and requires skilled biologists and strict safety procedures. And the bottom picture shows the final stage of releasing a bighorn sheep ram that has been marked with a tracking collar. And a little bit more on the non-game wildlife program. These are some of the major conservation responsibilities. And again, it's statewide, and we work with many interdisciplinary teams. We work on California Endangered Species Act, the acronym is CESA, listing petitions, petition evaluations, and status reviews, and I'll talk about those a little bit more later. We also issue research permits for wildlife surveys and studies. We scientifically identify species of special concern, which is a special CDFW designation I'll touch on again later. And we also implement a cooperative agreement, MOU, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, one of the federal agencies we work most closely with. And we coordinate state wildlife grants, help implement the State Wildlife Action Plan, and coordinate Section 6 federal grants. Section 6 is a part of the Federal Endangered Species Act. So we get a lot of our research monies from those two federal programs. We also conduct wildlife research, surveys, population assessment, and monitoring. And we write and manage contracts, grants, and associated budgets, including careful tracking of required matching funds and in-kind services. This is a little busy slide, but we do a lot of work and we have a lot of species, even though we're a small program. So here are just a few examples of our priority species and cooperative conservation efforts with federal, state, county, tribal, and non-governmental organizations. We also coordinate our conservation efforts with CDFW biologists and law enforcement officers in 7 regions in California, along with other states and countries for some species. In the Pacific Flyway Non-Game Technical Committee, abbreviated NTC, way at the top of the list, specialists in the department act in a lead role, representing the department from a scientific perspective. The Pacific Flyway encompasses 12 U.S. states. Some products from the NTC include development and implementation of survey protocols for short-eared owl, double-crested cormorant, and American white pelican. Senior specialists also work with the Directorate of CDFW when formulating policy-type decisions and creating letters to other agencies stating our position on vital issues. For example, most recently, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and changes to the definition of critical habitat, which again relates closely to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The number of species popping up in front of you here, these are status review reports. It's a selection of CISA petition evaluations as well. Before we write a status review report under the California Endangered Species Act, we first get a petition, and the petitions usually come in from outside entities. And these reports have been completed by non-game wildlife program specialists. Some of the species here are carnivores, Fisher and Humboldt martin, the American pika, the little guy in the upper left there, California tiger salamander, far bottom right, and Xanthus's murrelet, now known as Scripps' murrelet, top middle there. The brown pelican on the right middle, status review was actually a delisting petition because the species was determined to be recovered, which means no longer in need of the protection of CISA. Specialists also prepare and present a PowerPoint presentation of their petition evaluation report and the status review report at the public meetings of the Fish and Game Commission. The lead specialist must maintain professional scientific and objective standards during the status review process, given there are many stakeholders with a broad spectrum of concerns across the state that can vary by the species. It can be a contentious process and often involves Public Record Act requests and may involve litigation. The status reviews also have management monitoring recommendations that we are supposed to implement in concert with landowners and other partners. That is, the process of recovery then begins with the ultimate goal to be able to delist the species so that protection under CISA is no longer deemed necessary. We also have an obligation to conduct 5-year status review reports on these species to see how we're doing, how their status is doing, when we have enough funds to do that. And this kind of goes on the heels of the ending there of what Simona presented. I'll start with some facts to frame the current crisis and importance of our work. California is one of 25 biodiversity hotspots in the world. It leads the nation in highest total number of species and highest number of endemic species, which are species that occur nowhere else. Habitat loss is a major cause of wildlife endangerment, and California has the largest human population in the USA, over 39 million people at this time. We have a global extinction crisis underway, and a recent scientific paper issued this dire warning. Not since the dinosaurs went extinct have so many species and populations died out so fast, both on land and in oceans. And they said, should the present rates of extinction continue, in as little as 2 human lifetimes, Earth would lose 3 out of every 4 familiar species forever, the so-called 6th mass extinction that is now beginning. Climate change effects are adding to the habitat loss problem. Thus, our challenge is to meet the needs of society while maintaining the state's remarkable biodiversity for future generations. And this is a small sample of the breadth of knowledge needed by senior scientists, the various animals we work on. In order to conserve our unique biodiversity and avoid the extinction of species in California, specialists are required to have a broad scientific knowledge base, including life history characteristics of individual species and their range and distribution in California, plus population ecology, biostatistics, genetics, taxonomy, ecology, animal behavior, wildlife diseases, and knowledge of the habitat types and ecosystems utilized by the animals under study, such as coast redwood forest for the endangered marbled murrelet. Knowledge of laws such as the California Environmental Quality Act, which is up there, top left, 2020 CEQA is the acronym, and the Fish and Game Code, along with the California Code of Regulations in Title 14 is needed. On a separate note, non-game wildlife program specialists are the lead scientists responsible for completion of the CDFW Species of Special Concern publications. And on this slide, the frog down there on the bottom, you can see the title of that book is California Amphibian and Reptile Species of Special Concern. And then on the far right, light blue, California Bird Species of Special Concern. An update of the mammal species of special concern is currently in process. Species of special concern face a number of threats to their survival, and they are species that we are trying to keep from becoming threatened or endangered. I think of them as being in the intensive care unit, while the threatened and endangered species are in the emergency room. One role that state scientists often have to play is as an expert witness. It's a very important role for state scientists. They may serve as expert witnesses in court cases. The example I'm familiar with myself is a federal court case regarding the CISA endangered and federally threatened marbled murrelet. It was regarding the Federal Endangered Species Act. And that little marbled murrelet is a forest nesting seabird, so it mostly is on the ocean and eats fish, but it nests in old-growth redwood trees. And the scientists for expert witness work usually have to prepare critical court exhibits. The example I had was a map of marbled murrelet distribution in California relative to the remaining 5% of old-growth redwood forest, indicating a preference for old growth. State scientists also have to prepare science-based reports, participate in deposition questioning, testify in court, and undergo cross-examination. State scientists work best as expert witnesses when they are experts on the species, its habitat, breeding behavior, and the various threats affecting the survival of the species. The case related to this slide involved whether a logging operation resulted in take of marbled murrelet forest nesting habitat. Court rulings are important as part of the regulatory matrix that state scientists have to work with while striving to conserve species. Many state scientists spend much time at their desk and on the computer all day, but scientists agree they need to get out in the field to establish and maintain their expertise by being familiar with how to identify various species and how to understand the biology of species and their habitat requirements. Specialists must also learn proper survey techniques and accepted survey protocols, along with study methods such as proper capture, handling, measuring, and marking. This expertise is essential for us to be successful in our monitoring efforts for the species and when writing conservation and recovery plans and status reviews. Expertise with various species is also helpful when we review research proposals and issue research permits for surveys and research to be done by researchers outside of CDFW. In a sense, we are the frontline workers for maintaining the health of plant, fish, and wildlife populations. I like to say we should have our fingers on the pulse of wildlife populations and make sure that we have the habitat necessary for biologically sustainable populations. That little last part is a quote from our Fish and Game Code. Many senior specialists have assisted with hiring, training, supervising, mentoring, and professional development of scientific aides, environmental scientists, and volunteers. We have also directed, reviewed, evaluated, and corrected work products on a daily basis and overseen their field work in remote locations. We also carefully evaluate their attendance patterns and work habits. This long-standing role of a specialist takes some of the stress away from the supervisor by assisting them with these duties. Given that specialists are capable of conducting the tasks just described, the huge pay disparity between a specialist and an ES supervisor seems particularly unfair. CDFW does offer training occasionally in being a lead person, and it is important that specialists have this continued opportunity to help their own professional development and build their credentials for any future promotion to a senior ES Sup or EPM. As noted earlier, scientific work helps drive important decisions and policy. It seems that since the pay differentials jumped so high between specialists and the supervisors and EPMs, that is, since the like pay for like work pay letter, the separation of specialists from important decision-making discussions and meetings has increased. Senior specialists have essentially been demoted and are losing a voice at the decision table. Beyond losing a voice at the table, we sometimes are not invited to the table. This is frustrating, demeaning, demoralizing, and stressful, given all the work scientists put into the science-based work product. To be included in higher-level meetings and decisions and allowed to speak is essential for professional development, especially for anyone who aspires to be a supervisor someday. How better for specialists to learn what factors may be of concern to supervisors, our staff attorneys, and the directorate than to hear it directly. A survey of environmental scientists and ES specialists was recently conducted in the Wildlife Branch. 2/3 of respondents indicated pay inequity impacts their willingness or ability to recruit others to work for CDFW, and 83% indicated they are considering promoting to a senior ES supervisor or EPM level for higher pay, even though they prefer to remain in the non-supervisory scientific track. Thus, the pay gap that previously did not exist is driving a desire to promote for pay because the pay differential is so extreme. The high cost of living in California also indicates the need for salary equity. Additionally, 17% of the respondents indicated they will be looking for a new job within 1 to 2 years due to the pay inequity issue. The wide pay gap has left many scientists feeling devalued and demoralized, and this can lead to a culture of apathy and indifference, resulting in less motivated teams of employees and potentially harming the natural resources that we are the trustee for. A culture of apathy and indifference also harms our relationship with the public and our working partnerships. The type of work done by the Wildlife Branch scientists is highly specialized, and no other state organization has a responsibility for responding to listing petitions under CISA writing status reviews, and working on big game animals like deer and bighorn sheep. I had mentioned Scripps' murrelets earlier when I discussed status review reports under the California Endangered Species Act. This is a Scripps' murrelet chick, just a few days old, from Santa Barbara Island off the coast of Southern California. In closing, I hope you can see the future of the state's biodiversity is in our hands. It's hard work, and we deserve fair pay. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for this opportunity to describe some of our conservation work.